Hey everyone, before we get started today, I just want to remind you that my wonderful co host Tianna G. Hansen's book, Singing Through My Wolf Bones, is now for sale, so check it out at the link listed in the description. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Wisdom Words podcast. I'm your co host, Neil Torelli.
I'm your guest co-host, Tianna G. Hansen, filling in for Rini O'Day.
And today we have with us a lot of different things, but a lot of different areas of expertise. As I was doing my research, do I introduce her like this or this or that? But for now, we'll just say transgenerational trauma expert and a host of other things, host of other accomplishments, Dr. Sangeeta Prasad. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited to talk with you about a lot of different subjects, and especially about transgenerational trauma. So, I guess we'll get into your background a little bit, but before we do that, can you explain just what exactly is transgenerational trauma?
Yeah. So oftentimes when we are in times of distress, we attribute distress to our own individual experiences without any contextualization and without an understanding of kind of ancestral trauma and the trauma that came in the generations before us. But what we know about genetics is that trauma gets encoded, shifts genetic coding for up to 3 generations. What we know about how we carry the people who raised us is that the way that they regulate their nervous systems influence how we regulate our own. And what we see with trauma is that sort of feeling, some people call it feeling hyped, some people call it feeling anxious. There's all kinds of words for it. Some people call it ataque de nervios, so many different ways of talking about it. That feeling is one that we sort of inherit from the people around us a lot of the time. And the way I see transgenerational trauma, it is understanding our caregivers, what they have passed along us, and understanding systematic oppression and how that has impacted those caregivers and how it impacts us and ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So is it like we often hear when we talk about addiction and things like that, right? We hear about the predisposed tendencies of, if your mom was an alcoholic and dad was an alcoholic or grandpa was, then you're more likely to, so better be careful there. If you might develop that addictive personality. So does the trauma have similar tendencies? Like if there was a lot of history of trauma with previous generations, then you might be more susceptible to it?
It's interesting because it's so unpredictable and so individual. Having PTSD does not mean that you are not resilient,
Right.
And so really thinking about each individual, and the way I can think about it is kind of risk factors for a person and protective factors for a person. And so in every family, there are strengths and there are deficits. In every culture, there are strengths and there are deficits. And having a pretty balanced view and flexibility in how we see things is, to me, the most important part. And trauma really robs us of our capacity to be flexible. To have the capacity to see the different things and the ways that they happen and understand that and be able to make conscious decisions. And I think the understanding is very important. And so we can have caregivers who interrupt the traumas that they have experienced. And inevitably, all of us carry something from our experiences. And so they may never engage in abuse, never engage in that, but they may themselves struggle with emotional regulation. And so we may not get building blocks of how to manage emotional life, which can feel confusing. And we may then carry some of their emotional life unknowingly because they didn't get those building blocks. And
Right.
to me, these are systems-based problems that too often in society we try to treat at an individual level. You know, is
Mhm.
it the
Yeah.
way we contextualize it is that it's mental illness. Like you may get depressed because you didn't have the building blocks, but
Right.
at the same time, nobody taught them. And there's an
Yeah.
assumption that that should come from family of origin. My question in this is why? Why does it have to come from family of origin if we are really trying to interrupt systems of oppression?
But do you see like examples of where ostensibly they may not have been through anything traumatic and yet they're still carrying that way because, like you said, they may not have the building blocks for even certain good things or may not recognize them as good things that are happening in their lives?
Yeah, like I struggled with depression as a young person. I did not have the emotional building blocks. It's probably why I do this. I was born on my mother's birthday. Maybe there's a reason I specialize in generational trauma.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, and so I think in part, so many people who come to me struggling with depression or anxiety, sometimes I tell them, I think it's the best part of yourself that let you know how distressed you are. You know,
Yeah, I
because,
love that.
you know, something in you is telling you, oh, I need to do some work to feel okay. And to me, that is very brave. And, you know, we diagnose as mental illness. And yes, in a way it is. And of course, when you are in that, it's horrible and it feels awful. And I don't wish that for anybody. And it's very treatable. But it's treatable when you learn to be unafraid of your emotional life. The mind can be a very scary place. And to learn how to navigate the mind, we really need accompaniment. You know, the way I think about it is, you know, I use this metaphor a lot. You're going in a cave, it's dark, it's scary, and you have to get to a place to get the rock that you need, fine. And you need somebody to carry a backpack with you and water and a flashlight. And you need somebody to tell you when you need to take a break. And that is what caregivers do in regulated settings so that we learn that. But so many of us have had to learn this in adulthood. And that's not the fault of our caregivers. To be clear, there have been systems in place that have made it adaptable to unlearn emotional life for many people. And so many of our caregivers learned not to read emotional cues to protect themselves. And so, in part, we have to begin to make space across generations to expand our emotional capacity and accept the good, the bad, and the ugly and know that it is human and it lives in all of us.
Right. So, yeah, and you mentioned being, which I think is amazing. You mentioned being born on your mom's birthday. That's like so cool. But can you get into your little bit of your background and how did you get into the space and what sort of was the springboard to get into it?
Yeah, so, you know, I'm Indian. Nobody dreams about being a psychologist who is from my culture of origin. You know, I had planned to be a human rights lawyer. I'm somebody who will always notice the things that were wrong. It's just in me from when I was very young. I think I'm pretty porous and spongy, so I feel the emotional lives of other people for better or for worse. And I think when I struggled with depression in college, I really started thinking about service work, and I've always been service-minded. And after college, I tried being a paralegal for a couple of months and said, oh, I don't think this is for me. And then I was a caseworker in DC working in a similar community to the one I work with now. And what I saw there really was, I was working with returning citizens. And then I became a pre-kindergarten teacher, and I taught in pre-kindergarten for a while, but decided I wanted to focus in parent mental health because I saw how scared a lot of those 4-year-olds were. I remember lifting up cots to put down and the kids thinking I was going to throw a cot at them and ducking. you know?
Wow.
So, and I would see the moms dropping off, and in the same neighborhood I'm working in now, and crying at drop off because they couldn't separate, or giving the child $1 to come home with them because they didn't want to leave school. And those experiences made me feel as though, okay, there's something else going on here that is getting in the way of education, that is getting in the way of this child feeling safe. And I wanted to pursue that. And so I went to graduate school in counseling, and then eventually worked in that space, and eventually got my doctorate. When I was in college, I had a hard time asking for food in the cafeteria. I think, you know, there are so many reasons for this, and so much of this is so treatable. And my goal is really to come up with ways where we are addressing the building of those emotional building blocks on a systems level. And to me, that is both in mind and in body, because the feeling is body-based. And so, you know, really thinking about body trauma, thinking about how we encourage the regulation of the nervous system, is really central to what we do at In the Streets now.
Well, that's a great segue into that, because I love the regulation of the nervous system. And maybe could you just touch on a little bit more of that and what you do with that, and how that helps with transgenerational trauma, or just maybe people who are caught in PTSD or other symptoms in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is central to therapeutic process is the relationship between the person being served and the healer. And for some people in talk therapy, that's great. That is how I am trained. I benefited tremendously from talk therapy myself. And I think it can be very beneficial, and it doesn't work for everybody. And so I think having different modalities around nervous system regulation is really important, and meeting people where they are in terms of how they store trauma. So at the nonprofit that I'm at, you know, most of the people who come into our space have been assaulted, you know, either in terms of peer-to-peer violence related to the neighborhood they're growing up in, or sexual assault. And so that body trauma, you know, living in this kind of very consistent state of fear is a reality for so many people in this country and in the world. And trauma is a state. It's not just like, I'm just going to fixate in this place and choose to think about this. That's not how it works.
No.
You know, it's a state that you kind of get stuck in. And so learning to, you know, unstuck might not be a word, but learning to become unstuck in that traumatic state is really the goal, so that you can learn. And I think you can do that through mind or through body. So some people can kind of use the mind, soften it, and kind of shift back. Other people, they can learn to soften the body and do the same thing to shift back. And so what we do here is we offer yoga and therapeutic mentorship. We're going to be running a summer jobs program where we'll offer plant therapy and art therapy as well. And so and because, you know, for wealthy kids, like young people, that costs tons of money to engage in therapeutic programming. And it should not only be accessible to people with money. And so our commitment is really making therapeutic access something that is open to young people in the community of Columbia Heights and DC. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I also just think it's the community members who inform what we do. They are the people who tell us, this is something I could use. And then we go find it. And so it's a very different model than conventional clinics in this way. And conventional clinics are needed, to be clear. like people need conventional treatment at times. There is a space for it, absolutely. We know that dyadic treatment and early intervention works. We know that working with a good therapist who can understand individual and contextual realities can be hugely beneficial. And so I think also like 1 hour a week is not enough to address multiple generations of trauma. And so, really kind of considering how often somebody needs to be coming in or wants to be coming in, and doing our best to meet those needs is the goal. Because sometimes it takes more than a generation to work through that. And that's okay. None of us is perfect. We do the best we can, and we work hard to do good in the world and to be well. Our director of wellness here, Asrate Gaga, says like, you have to be good to yourself to be good to others, and you have to make time for your wellness. Otherwise you make time for your illness.
I think when you often talk about like transgenerational trauma, you're like, oh, wow, how far back does it go? And, you've already maybe experienced it in your own generation. Like, what sense of hope would you offer to people if they're feeling maybe a bit overwhelmed or, like want to dip their toes in the water, so to speak?
I think you are in charge of how far you dip your toe in. Nobody else can be in charge of that. And so I don't think people should feel pressure to address this or to talk about it. You have to feel safe enough to do that. But I do think there are a lot of gifted clinicians and healers who exist to serve. And so really considering how to dip your toe in the water, with whom to dip your toe in the water, what the temperature of the water should be like for you, if you need to do any preparation for your toe before you dip it in the water. These are sort of the questions to ask. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah, and that reminder again that you can be supported, obviously, by individuals such as yourself or somebody else who they choose to. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I just think it is about accompaniment.
Yeah.
We all get scared of our own minds sometimes.
Oh,
yeah.
And
sometimes more than sometimes too.
And that's a reality. And not making that feel weird or bad, but just knowing that that is human. And that there are plenty of people who can say, oh yeah, I've had that happen too. And that's very helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned like people needing that combination of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of body, a little bit of mind. Are there initial steps you can suggest for viewers slash listeners that they can take if they're in that state of mind where it's just their trauma has taken over their lives and they don't know where to go or how to get started in that process of treatment? What are some of the things they can do to supplement, the therapy that they're getting or the professional therapy or what you offer or your, place offers?
Yeah, I think there are lots of ways to do this. There's no recipe that works for everybody. But I do think when you wake up, doing that grounding is important. Noticing where you are, noticing how you feel, not kind of rushing the minute you wake up and re-entering that state, but trying to kind of settle in that space. And it can be just breathing. It can be looking at a pretty picture of nature that you like, or going for a walk. It could be, maybe you have a coloring book and a colored pencil and you do that for 15 minutes, or you meditate, or, but I also think treatment is really important, and there are not enough people available to treat. So that's not on the person who is looking to be served. But the nature of trauma is such that it is really hard to trust people a lot of the time. And so I think I would also say, if there is somebody who you trust, try and spend time with them, you know, like try and reach out to them, see if there's something you can schedule that is something that you can look forward to every week or every couple of weeks. And if you don't have that, you know, there's a lot of good people out there. So find them, you know, like find a place that feels okay to you and keep going would be my suggestion. And that could be a clinic. It could be a yoga studio. It could be a hiking group, a biking group, whatever it looks like. But I do think getting to know the body, finding strength and flexibility in the body is useful. And I don't know, I suspect having a more flexible body and being able to soften the body, that is going to be helpful in that as well. So you could stretch, you could breathe, just things that calm the nervous system and help regulate.
So, tell us a little bit about, you mentioned this earlier, but more in detail about what exactly is in the streets and, you know, what is that all about?
Yeah, so in the streets, I ran racial equity groups at a school in the neighborhood of Columbia Heights, and it's the neighborhood I worked in when I moved to DC in 2003 also. And so we engage in a participatory action model of care. I had the privilege of working in India in domestic violence, and they engage in kind of Ambedkar style participatory action. And I really learned a tremendous amount about confronting the norms around care based in authority figures and in institutions that have not been designed by the people who are being served. And so the idea behind In the Streets was really to offer continuity of care in this community for a long time. I was tired of working at nonprofits where you work 3 years and then see you later, or you work 11 years and then see you later, because it's not the nature of what is needed. And so the goal was really to create a space where we can both offer care to people and then develop natural gifts in the people who we serve who are interested in learning the healing arts as well.
But yeah, thank you for doing what you do overall. Not just, I mean, thank you for coming on here, but also just doing what you do. I've seen like your other platforms, podcast interviews where you've talked a little bit more about the, you know, philanthropic side of yours and all that. And I think it's so admirable what you do.
Thank you. You know, I think I've been lucky to see role models and teachers and ancestors in my own life who have been committed to service and who have shown a way of kindness. And so without them, I wouldn't be here.
Share all your links and all that.
Sure. So you can look on our website, www.inthestreets.org. We're located in Columbia Heights. So if you are a community member, please feel free to come in. And yes, that's the best place for now.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you both for having me. I'm glad that you're doing this too. Getting information out about health is really important.
Thank you for joining us today on Daily Wisdom Words. Thank you, Dr. Prasad, for joining us and speaking about transgenerational trauma.
Be sure to hit like on this video and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Be sure to tune in every week at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.
Yeah.